Hello, 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 beautiful people. I am back, and we are continuing the series Triumph Together Challenge. We are up to chapter 5 and 6. Can you guys believe that it actually is happening? So it's actually happening. We were able to get through 4 chapters, and we've had great conversations with many of the authors as a result of that experience. So this is going to be building on we already know. It's just a great discussion. You guys have been listening to me talk about how participating in the Triumph in the Trenches anthology has just opened my eyes in so many ways, to be able to collaborate with so many talented, capable, exceptional leaders in their own respective disciplines, whether that's in nonprofit, corporate America, academia, federal work, all of those things. Like everyone was represented in this anthology. And I really couldn't have asked for a more well-rounded group of people to be able to start these conversations with. So excited for that. And I always got to make sure that I live in my honest truth and get all of my housekeeping out of the way first. And first, I want to make sure that folks know that the Triumph Together Challenge is in process, right? We're in week 3 of that, and it's not too late for you to join. Every single week when we get together, we will go through 2 new chapters, and each chapter is its own kind of treasure trove of just amazing gems related to that author's expertise as it relates to corporate America. So if you're watching this now, whether you're watching it on LinkedIn live or you're watching it on YouTube live as you're streaming, the only requirement to be able to participate is 1, you have to be following me on LinkedIn, connected with me on LinkedIn. 2, you have to join the Gems for the Journey newsletter, and that Gems for the Journey newsletter can be found directly at gemsforthejourney.org. And then 3, you have to join us live. So it's really, really simple. Join us live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we will go through Triumph Together Challenge with each one of our co-authors and co-collaborators on the anthology. So really easy to participate, and you can jump in with us right now because this conversation today is going to be dope. If you're joining us live, please do take an opportunity to drop your city in the chat. If you drop your city in the chat, it always gives us an opportunity to shout you out, and it lets us know who's joining us live. And since I have 2 of my amazing co-authors with me here today, I know that the chat is going to be fire. So I'm going to keep my eye on the comments and try to facilitate the conversation. But you guys know once the conversation gets started, I get really excited. So I'll make sure I'll double check at the end if there was a comment that was made, and we'll make sure we'll do our best to get to it. So with no further ado, I want to introduce you to, I'm going to bring them on stage, Dr. I love to call Black women doctor. Dr. Baker Jones. It is one of my favorite things to do is to acknowledge their credentials. And then we're also going to be joined by the talented Philip Woolfolk. So Philip and Dr. Jones are going to join us today. Baker Jones are going to join us today to talk about their chapters. They were chapter 5 and 6. And I did a post about them yesterday. So I'm just going to read really quickly the quotes that I pulled from their chapters. And then we're going to make sure that we get their introduction. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm really excited to have both of you here today and looking forward to this great conversation. Do you guys want to just say hi, and then I'll read kind of the quotes and we can jump right into the conversation?
Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here to chat with you all today and just share any nuggets of wisdoms that I've gleaned from my triumphs in the trenches.
Excellent, excellent. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite, Leah. Awesome to meet Dr. Baker Jones here virtually, and looking forward to this conversation today.
Awesome. So, all right, we're going to jump right into it because you guys both had some really deep chapters. There was so much meat, so many gems there. So I'm going to start with Dr. Baker Jones. And the quote that I pulled from your chapter, chapter 5, which is titled "A Jedi Warrior Leads with Grace." The quote that I pulled from there, and this is the gem that really stuck with me, was, "When we push back against the system, the status quo snaps back twice as hard." And when I read the quote, I was just thinking, man, there's so many instances where we're trying to work towards a change in a workplace or in an environment, and we're wondering why people are not receptive. And it instantly rang true that the status quo exists for a reason, and people exist to protect the status quo. So just tell me a little bit about your experience there, and I'd love to hear your perception of why that was so important to include in the chapter. And then, Philip, I'm going to jump into your quote too, because yours was also fire. But Dr. Baker Jones, help me understand, why was that so important to incorporate in your chapter?
Right. Thank you, Leah. And thank you for having me. So for me, it was important to include because of my role in leading for DEI. I've always been an equity warrior, equity champion, whatever the buzzword is that we now have for that. But my entire life and career orientation has been towards fighting for justice and ensuring that everyone has equity and access in everything that they do. And I was doing that well before DEI became a thing in the media and the thing to do. And so, and in various roles and capacities. My most recent role, however, was one in which I was explicitly in a role that was designed to lead for DEI. I was an equity officer. And I feel like that role didn't give me the amount of cover that I had previously in other roles to do this work, because it put out on Front Street, I'm leading for DEI. I'm here to challenge the status quo. I'm here to buck up against the system. And not having that level of cover that you typically have when you're leading this work in roles that may not be so explicit, just allow me to see how deeply entrenched the status quo is in our society. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was to exclude particular groups of people from participating fully in our society. And when you come in and you try and seek to dismantle that, it has a natural immune response to how that is going to how it's going to respond to what you're doing to disrupt the system. It is I used to tell people, I'm in an organization and it has organ in it for a reason. It functions like an entity and it has an immune response. And when you try to challenge that the way the system is operating, that immune response kicks in and it fights back twice as hard. You are a foreign entity trying to disrupt the way the organization was built to function. And I felt that very explicitly and very hard in a role where my role was explicitly to do that on a daily basis. And so I felt it was important to put that in there and call that out, because I think that we all know the system is doing what it was designed to do, but articulating it in a way where it's an immune response and is a natural immunity to a system was, I think, a eye opener for me as I was in that role.
So I think it's super helpful, because a lot of times people are experiencing the immune response, but they don't have the language to describe it. So I was really happy that you incorporated it in your chapter, because oftentimes we're in situations where we experience things and we know something is wrong, but we can't explain it to other people, or we don't have the language to be able to explain it to other people, to be able to get their buy-in or support, or even just expand their understanding so that they know what we're experiencing. So, all right, so we're gonna come back and talk more about some of the really in-depth work that you did in chapter 5. But I want to bring Philip's quote to the table, because Philip took an angle in his chapter that I was personally inspired by, because I'll just read the quote, and then I won't lead the audience. I carried an unsigned resignation letter in my briefcase. It kept me grounded in the fact that I was hired and compensated to do a job, and either party could terminate that relationship at any time for any reason. So that is the quote that I pulled out, that really resonated with me from your chapter, Philip. And the same question goes for you. Why did you think it was so important to incorporate that quote specifically in your chapter? What were you trying to accomplish by giving that real vivid visual for people?
Well, I think one of the reasons, Leah, is, in my current capacity, I serve as Chief Operations Officer for the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. And in that role, I work with a lot of professionals, a lot of business owners. And what I try to articulate to them is the importance of really establishing multiple streams of income, and being positioned that you're able to do your job while you're doing your job, but at the same time, you're in a position not to have to take crap from people. And so that carrying the the resignation letter in my briefcase was really born out of an experience with my first banking position. I started as a teller, and the bank was acquired. And when that bank was acquired, by that time I was in a sales role and was compensated on salary plus commission. And that company decided to basically get rid of the commission. And so what that meant was a pay cut for me and others like me who were top producers within that organization. And what I learned from that experience was basically that the corporate structure is designed to facilitate profits for the business. And so there's not a lot of room for how does my decision affect Phil Woolfolk? So the only way to really ensure that you can overcome that is to really be able to have your own thing outside of what you do, and really be positioned that if your compensation is impacted in your job, you know, that you can maintain your lifestyle, and your lifestyle is not really, you know, covered 100% by the job that you have. So it's interesting you pull out that particular piece from my chapter, because the current role that I have is the only one in which I did not carry a resignation letter in my briefcase. And one of the reasons for that is that working for the chamber has been a labor of love for me. So I spent about 4.5 years on the board as the board treasurer, as a volunteer. And then during the pandemic, through my consulting practice, did some work with the chamber to help mitigate the challenges and barriers that businesses faced during the pandemic. And then on the other side of the pandemic, I became a staff member and became the chief operations officer for the chamber. And in that role, being able to work with businesses to help provide access to capital and also business support services in terms of helping them be able to grow and sustain their businesses. So that chapter really speaks to, in large part, to business professionals like I was at the time. I spent about 25 years in the banking industry, and I saw firsthand what happens when a corporation decides to close down a business unit, for example. You know, I had a supervisor at one point who used to always say I was the only one on the team who didn't have any personal items in my office. I had no pictures, I had no flowers, I had no plants, right? And so I would say to him, well, that's because this is not my office. This is your office. And so we were sitting in his office one day, and a division had been shut down, and they were basically told they had till 5 o'clock to clean out their desk. And there are people going back and forth with their boxes as they were emptying out their desks. Some of them being with the organization, you know, 10, 15 years. They got all kinds of stuff to pack up. So I said to him, I said, you know, if you come into my office and say that I need to pack up by 5 o'clock, I have my briefcase leaning up against the wall. I'll be out of here in 3 minutes. I got nothing to pack, right? And so I went through my corporate existence really with that attitude. And you know, I also used to get a lot of questions about from family members and friends, you know, because I started a real estate business at a young age, and they would say, you know, you're always working. Why are you always working? And I used to say to them, well, you know, I don't really work for money. I work for freedom, right? And so the business has given me the freedom over the years to be able to do things that I would otherwise not have been able to do. You know, for example, I happened to be in Pentagon City on September 11th, 2001, when the terrorists attacked the country. And the hotel we were in at a fair lending conference, you know, it rattled, and it kind of felt like a tremor. But we all kind of simultaneously realized we're not in California, we're in Washington. So exactly what was that? So someone got up, went to the front of the hotel. Everybody was watching the TV. We had no clue of what had already happened in New York, what had
Wow.
already happened in Pennsylvania. And so the promoters for the program brought down this big screen, and then we were brought up to speed. But I say all that to say that that led me to feel and to make a decision about what was important for me. And so my corporate
Yeah.
climb was a lot less important. My two daughters were younger then, and so I had an interest in spending more time with them. So because I developed a successful real estate investment company, I was able to leave the bank and I was able to spend 5 years at home, golfing and camping and swimming and traveling and basically enjoying my family. And so when I talk to people about developing multiple streams of income and establishing a basis for how you can control your lifestyle yourself, it is not something I've read about or heard about. This is how I've lived my life, and this is and I've had good success in terms of my ability to pivot and navigate the winds of change that happen to us all.
So you guys have both said so many good things, and I'm like, okay, where do I go first? Right? What is the next question that needs to go first? So first, for Dr. Baker Jones, I see all of us are from the East Coast, right? So I'm from Philadelphia. It sounds like both of you are Jersey, residents,
Right.
Central and South Jersey. So there is a certain style, right, that comes when you're from those regions of the United States. And ultimately, we're constantly in environments that are evolving. And sometimes those environments feel like they no longer fit or they don't align to the way that we see the world. So when you think about participating in something like an anthology to talk about navigating success as a Black professional specifically, considering where we're all from, and I know a lot of your followers and folks who are joining us are going to have a similar perspective. I'd love to hear your perspective on how do you advise folks now as they're reading this book and saying, okay, I want to be successful in these environments. I want to figure out what's best for me, and develop that strategy, because it's a lot of people that I talk to as in my business as a coach to develop that strategy for them to navigate it. What do you really want folks to take away from your specific chapter as you think about what it looks like to develop a successful strategy in corporate nonprofit leadership or any of the areas where folks find themselves professionally? So I'll start with Dr. Baker Jones. And Philip, if there's anything else that you want to toss in there, please do. But I would
So
love to start with you, Dr. Baker Jones.
Right. Yeah, shout out to Jersey. I'm actually from North New Jersey, which is northern New Jersey, born and raised. And I appreciate your call out about the distinct characteristics and social style of folks from the Northeast, particularly. The way in which and the culture in which I grew up tends to be very direct, and it tends to be very authentic, and that's welcome in a lot of spaces, professionally and personally, in the where I was raised. And what I quickly learned just in my 23 years as a professional is that, and I used to say, I'm going to show up as my authentic self everywhere I go. I'm showing up as my authentic self. And what I've learned is that everybody doesn't deserve the privilege of knowing my authentic self. And that's kind of what I took away from my experiences professionally. And I also realized that my identity is very layered. So in my chapter, I talk about my Leading with Grace framework, and the G in grace stands for grace. And how do you extend grace for yourself and grace for others? And one of the things that I've had to do to extend grace to myself was be very clear on the multiple layers of my identity. And in the chapter, I talk about Ronald Heifetz's book, Adaptive Leadership, and I talk about how we have different levels of our identity. We have our level 1 identities, our level 2 identities. And in those levels of identity, the identity shows up in the way where you have your professional identity, which is your surface or your level 1. I'm a chief equity officer. I'm a Black woman, right? You can see that professionally. You see that when I walk in the door. And then there are those level 2 identities, which are identities that were ascribed to me or that I've inherited because of my family, like being from Jersey, for example, or being a social justice, oriented person. Those are things you might not readily see about me, but they are part of my identity. And then mapping out those level 1 and level 2 identities allows me to determine which identity identity am I going to dial up or dial down in certain contexts and situations? And it allows me the grace to navigate and the freedom to navigate spaces in a way where I can be successful, because my authentic self is all of those identities wrapped up into one. But that doesn't mean that every single identity needs to walk into a room with me, or even does. To protect it, I might not even want it to walk into a room with me in certain contexts and in certain situations. And so that's in the chapter.
Can I just interrupt you? Because I think what you've done for people there is really important. There is this push where a lot of employers will try to create a narrative that, bring your authentic self to work. We're a community, we're a family. But in the words that you just shared, you gave permission for people to say, all of my identity does not have to go everywhere I go, even if people request it, even if that's what they ask, whether it's because I want to protect that other part of my identity, or whether it's because I don't feel safe doing the things that are a part of my identity in the workplace. And I just think that is so powerful for people, especially young people who are coming into the workplace and getting, indoctrinated in some ways to these cultures that are very demanding of your personal life, personal time, access to information, as we work virtually or work in person or some kind of hybrid mode. So I just love that you called that out. Everybody's not worthy of it. And when I protect it, it's not me being inauthentic. Sometimes it's because I don't want to. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And if I could add, the other thing I think that this does very powerfully too, Dr. Baker Jones, is that, people like to sometimes put us in a box, and then they identify us a certain way, and then they expect us to respond within that box. So I remember being in a meeting years ago, and I was the only African American in the room, and I was in the room with senior executives at this company, and someone asked the question. I had been there probably 4 or 5 years at that point. Had I experienced, racism, or, being mistreated because I was black, and that was the question, right? And so I think how they expected me to respond was to give them a laundry list of my own experiences. And the way I responded threw them a little off balance, because my response was simply, this organization does a pretty good job of mistreating people across all lines, regardless of regardless of race, ethnicity, and I threw out a very specific example of what had recently happened to a white executive within the company, who had been there for, since he graduated from high school. And because there was an acquisition on tap, and his job was really part of that discussion, he ended up losing his position, because the company that was being acquired agreed to come on board only if they could bring their entire team. And so that meant, we're not laying off any of our folks. So whoever is collateral damage on your side as it relates to our business, bye bye to them, right? So they made that decision based on business, but it impacted a white executive within the company, right? And so there are other instances where those kind of decisions impacted black folks in the company. And so the way I perceived it was, you guys are making decisions based on green. And if it happens to impact somebody black, if it happens to impact somebody Hispanic or white, it doesn't matter. We're making dollar decisions, and that's kind of where it falls. Now the microaggressions and the other stuff that you tend to experience, in my view, in my case, a lot of times was with really lower level executives who are, trying to muscle their way in certain areas, and prove that they could push you around. And so, I grew up in an environment where you learn very, very early in life you don't allow that. So my pushback was always standing my ground as related to respect.
So so I know we may lose Dr. Baker Jones here in a little bit. I know she has another time commitment, so I want to just get one more question in. Philip, will you be able to stay with us for a little bit longer?
Oh, sure.
Okay, awesome. So, Dr. Baker Jones, I just wanted to let you finish your thought. I know I jumped in and interjected because I thought that that language was so important, and I wanted to make sure that people took that gem away. But I wanted to make sure you got a chance to finish your thought and let folks know where they can find your work or be able to collaborate with you and learn more about the work that you're doing.
Right. Thank you, Leah. So yeah, I mean, they can find my work at trinitystrategy.org. Trinity Strategy is a consulting firm that I co-founded, and we support systems leaders with organizational change management. And helping them to think through and be successful in change management strategies, regardless of what the change manager strategy is. And we also do leadership capacity building. And so if you go to www.trinitystrategy.org, you can not only purchase the book, but you can also learn more and access and contact me as well. But no, so many gems have been dropped during this discussion. I love Philip's recommendation and advice about carrying your resignation letter in your briefcase. I actually mentioned that in my chapter, that was one of the first pieces of advice that I got from a mentor, where he told me to write my resignation letter the day I signed my offer letter. And I did not do that. And I actually wish I had. And so I just wanted to echo that advice because it was the best piece of advice I received then. And then I'm hearing it again. And I believe in like reverberation and just hearing that again is just confirmation that, freedom, it's all about freedom, right? And especially for the ancestral background that I have and that I bring into spaces where my ancestors were denied freedom, and denied freedom from labor, right? And I think that that's an important call out because everything we're talking about is Black professionals in the workplace, and the levels of oppressions and the macro aggressions that we face in the workplace. Once again, our labor being diminished, being attacked, feeling oppressed, feeling suppressed in these spaces, and the amount of mental fortitude that you are sometimes required to have in order to sustain and be successful in these spaces is exhausting. And how do we give ourselves the freedom and flexibility to breathe and to be able to just say, I'm good. I'm gonna walk out and I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna be all right, right? And so I appreciate the multiple streams of income recommendation, the reclaiming your time by having your resignation letter ready to go when you say I've had enough and I need to have freedom. And so, all of that I feel is liberating, and the gems that are dropped in this anthology from multiple professionals across the multiple sectors. Not only do we share a common collective experience, and that's what I saw jump out to me reading the chapters, is that regardless of the sector that we were in, we all have experience and shared experiences in these spaces, which means that it's not just us. It's something about the system that is creating this collective experience of trauma in certain situations. But we also have stories of victory, stories of resistance that echo an ethos that date way back beyond us. That what I found we brought to the workplace and found strategies and ways to kind of cultivate and carve out freedom and success for ourselves despite what we found ourselves in. And that's always been the narrative of our people. And I feel like this book just shows how in corporate and professional spaces that tradition continues, which is both inspirational, but also it hurts a bit as well, because why are we still, why is our labor still in this situation, and why do we still have to make a way out of no way in these situations? And so that's kind of what I would leave with. I feel that the framework that was successful for me to navigate in that space and be successful in a space of that nature. I hope that other people find inspiration, and I hope that that framework allows them to be equally as successful and give them the freedom that they need to breathe. it still triumphed despite being in trenches, which is a war metaphor.
Right.
And so that is what I hope for my chapter, and also what I hope for our book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Baker Jones. It has been amazing. So stay with us as long as you can.
I will.
If you do have to leave us, we totally understand. It has been amazing having you.
Thank you, Leah, for having me.
Pleasure. And actually, if I could interrupt just a
Yeah.
moment, Leah, before Dr. Baker Jones has to jump off, given the type of work that she does and the work that the chamber is currently doing around the New Jersey state disparity study, I would advise you and others who may be hearing this call today to visit aaccnj.com. Keep up with what the work that the chamber is doing. Get involved in advocating for change that the chamber is working on right now. The founder, president, and CEO, John Harmon, is working with our task force to really help close the gap on the disparities as it relates to public contracts. And when you dig into the 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 disparity study and really get into the meat of it, what you really find is that billions of dollars have been spent, and as taxpayers, we're not receiving any level of reciprocity as it relates to the share of contracts we should be getting. So I know that there's some work going on now to help close that gap. And if you're in the professional services space and other areas where you may be able to use your expertise, keep an eye on that. There is a a town hall being held at Rutgers Camden campus on actually this week. You can find out about it at the aaccnj.com. Register for it if you're able to, and participate so you can have that information as a resource to help further your business.
Awesome. Thank you for that resource. It's helpful for anybody who is listening and in the region. And also, it's just a good reminder that we have to be in the business of doing the things that are important to us in order to collaborate and find other people who are like-minded and have similar ideals. We have to be doing the work in order to find those people. And this
Absolutely.
anthology has definitely taught me that too. There were all kinds of ideas and things that I was interested in, and trying to draw it all together and putting it on paper and then being able to share it with you all and collaborate on this has just really transformed those ideas. So just wanting to encourage folks, if you have something that you're working towards, do the work, stay in the work, and the right connections, relationships, people, collaborations come from doing the work and being in work that's tied to your purpose, tied to something that you're, really passionate about. So wanted to make sure I gave folks that reminder.
Yeah, and I would agree with Dr. Baker Jones. I think one of the things that resonate with for me for the book overall is the fact that when you're in the trenches, you think you're in the trench by yourself, right? But
Very true.
you see something like this and you realize this is just a small microcosm of what we're all dealing with, not only in the United States but globally. When you look at the colonization of the world, um, it puts us at a disadvantage in terms of disparate treatment across the board. And so, there are just countless instances, where we're not getting our just due, but we're contributing in terms of with the disparity study in New Jersey, for example. We're all paying taxes. So why is it the majority of the contracts are going to white men?
It's so important,
You know,
Philip, to put that into context. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's so important to put that into context. First, many people need the reminder that they're not in the trenches alone.
right,
Even though sometimes you walk into the room, you're the first, you're the only in that room.
right.
I think that's part of the way the system works against us.
Mhm.
It's keeping us in a perception that we are the only one struggling against the status quo,
Right,
right? And that can, in some ways drive people to make a whole different set of decisions if they would have known, there are other people who are experiencing this. I can find community to help me navigate it. I can find resources, professional development resources, strategies to help me navigate this, or I can opt out, right? Like,
right,
I have several useful options that I can activate.
right,
But if I keep thinking, well, it's just me, I'm the problem, I may think I'm the one who has to adjust. I have to correct. I
right,
have to be less of my authentic self. I have to, code switch and I have to cover such that I can stay in these environments. But
Right.
just this dialogue, as well as the book itself, just reminds people, it could free someone from that misconception. I'm in
Oh
the
yeah.
trenches,
Oh
and
yeah.
I'm there by myself.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that. That's a real
Oh.
gem that I think a lot of people potentially are struggling with. And,
Oh,
and I think the
absolutely.
conversation
And I wanted to add to that, Leah, is that our struggle as Black professionals is not uncommon for the struggle of marginalized professionals in general.
Okay.
And the same strategies that we use to be successful and navigate any oppressed group, will find that those same strategies and outcomes are prevalent and useful for them as well. And so I just also wanted to echo that although the anthology highlights the experiences of Black professionals in white dominant spaces, those experiences, although they may have unique characteristics, are not germane in isolation only to Black professionals. So whether you're a woman or LGBTQ plus, you will find strategies and tools in this anthology that can also help you navigate oppressive spaces as well and still triumph and be successful in those spaces. So I also just wanted to elevate that as well, because I think that sometimes that could be lost in the fact that oh well, that's their experience, but they're gems that everyone can glean from our experiences. And quite honestly, when you think about the book and as you read the book, you realize it's really just a change management book. How do you manage up and across, so that you can make a way for yourself to get the space you need to be you and show up as your best self in environments that may not welcome that or be as welcoming to that
Absolutely.
on a daily basis.
Yeah. And as Dr. Baker Jones mentioned earlier, the system is designed to protect the system. So change agents are often the targets when when it relates to, who's getting in the way of us maintaining the status quo. And so we find ourselves a lot of times in corporate spaces by ourselves. That is by design, right? It's not like, Dr. Baker Jones was the only Black person that did XYZ, but she I'm sure found herself, as I did many times, in these meetings by myself and in meetings alone herself. But you know, it's not like there were not another 20 Black people that could have been in the room had the opportunity been provided for them to be in the room. But if too many of us are in the room, then we're no longer the minority, right? And the system is designed to make us think and feel as though we're the minority, we're by ourselves, the whole 9 yards. If you look at the global, makeup just population wise, we've never been the minority, but 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 there are a handful of folks that control the economics, control the politics, and they've been masterful at the propaganda around minority and that we are minority and that we are poor and that we are underprivileged and that we are less than. And so the school system, all of it is designed to create not creative thinkers and independent thinkers, but people who will follow the rules and and kind of stay in line and keep their place. And for those of us who refuse to operate that way, you're continuously a target if you're in corporate spaces. And that's why you really have to make sure, you can feed your family outside of your corporate job.
So
Otherwise,
That's
you
a
are,
whole word right
I
there.
right.
was not only was it a whole word. So first, and I'm gonna close this out here in a little bit because I feel like this might require a part two. I don't know how long you guys can hang out with this, but I feel like it's gonna require a part two because first, when you both have talked about being change agents in your respective fields,
Mhm.
and oftentimes we take on these large challenges in a corporate space, even if it's just a project, or
Right.
even if it is, launching a new product or introducing a new brand or, integrating another company, whatever those things are, we take on these big kind of change agent type of assignments. And then we're unclear as to what the friction points are going to be. So I love that Philip, you said the change agents are often the ones that are the target. So anytime you're in a place where you're challenging the status quo or you're pushing against norms that other people are very, very comfortable with, why would I change? I am benefiting from the status quo.
Right.
My summer home, in at the shore is because of the status quo,
Hmm.
or my children going to private school is because the status quo exists. So no, I don't want to help you change the system. I want the system to stay just as it is, right? And
Right.
that's what these people who are in these institutions are saying. So that I feel like is like the
Oh yeah.
biggest
Oh
takeaway,
yeah.
right? For a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Hallelujah, amen, right?
Yeah, they're
But then
thinking
even
legacy, right? They're thinking, they have children, they have grandchildren, they're thinking about their great grandchildren. You're going to change things, and what's that going to mean for the legacy in terms of the folks that come behind me, right?
Right,
right. And
right.
they don't want that. So I'm always just trying to pull out the gems so people can see if you're in this situation right now, right? And you're figuring out, I have a change that I need to drive through an organization. Understanding what the status quo is going to feel or say or how they may resist whatever change you're introducing will then help you, one, kind of strategize, find allies, but it'll also make you know that you're not crazy, right?
Right,
There's so many times that like you get gaslit into thinking you're the one that's tripping,
right,
or you get assigned to be a change agent by a senior leader who has no capacity or is not going to provide you the air cover that you talked about,
right,
Dr. Baker Jones, to do the work, right? So understanding how those dynamics work can be freeing in some regard and also helps you to navigate your career and professional spaces. Maybe you opt out of participating in certain kind of change agent roles without the right budget, without the right support system, without the right consultancy, without the right air cover. Maybe you say, no, that's not the right fit for me. Or you negotiate that in when you're
right.
into those kind of change agent roles. So there were just so many gems that you guys pulled out. But I think what we've all kind of been able to resoundingly agree on this call specifically and on this live specifically is, one, you're not alone in these spaces. And the more we can find community and seek out like-minded people in order to help us navigate the space if we want to stay, or help us opt out and build a strategy to go through financial independence, through other streams of income, both of those things are on the table. And even if you don't have them now, you can always build it, right? Today
Absolutely.
is a great day to start to build what that perspective could be elsewhere outside of the role that you're in.
Right.
And then, secondly, as you read this book, and all of us have come as experts from completely different sectors and even regions of the world, there are some consistent threads. And as you read those consistent threads, as we come from different perspectives, there's still this resounding need that there is a triumph that is possible. It requires all of us to think about our own individual needs and collective experiences and really continue to do the work on
Right.
ourselves, right? Like our mindset and our perspective has to continue to shift in order for us to triumph in these environments. Otherwise, the global majority never gets to have the majority decision making rights if
Oh,
we
absolutely.
if we don't participate. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
you guys
So
have go ahead.
in my other role outside the chamber, I serve as managing director of Phillips Speaks LLC, and my tagline is "Decide to be unstoppable." And I think when you're in those corporate spaces and you have these barriers and challenges that you face on a daily basis, you have to plan and schedule some time for yourself to develop your own possibility plan. What are the things that you can do outside of your corporate space that positions you to be able to survive economically outside of your role? And if you end up spending 10, 15, 20 years in a corporate role with, some of us were fortunate enough to have six-figure incomes and stock options and bonuses, all that. I advise people all the time that those resources are not for you to go out and buy a new car every couple of years, right? You should be saving and investing and positioning yourself for the day that you no longer have that job. Whether that means you're fortunate enough to be there long enough to retire, or you're like Dr. Baker Jones and you're a change agent, and someone decides she's too good at her job. Maybe we don't need her in that role anymore. We we need somebody with the title who'll just kind of come in to work and go home. She thought we actually wanted change. so so you know so
You
you
triggering
sometimes
me, Philip.
wait, so, so, so sometimes you're in this corporate spaces, you're thinking I'm doing my
Right,
job, and
right.
they don't
And
want
I
you to do
really
the
had
job
to
that
unpack
well,
what
right?
was the trauma response that led me to take that job, right? That's a whole nother conversation. Because
Right,
sometimes we gravitate towards these jobs because of our own history and waters that we're carrying,
right.
right? And you want to be that, change agent. So
Oh, sure.
that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I
Well,
appreciate that call out and being seen, Philip. I feel seen.
we will have to come back, Leah.
Right.
You will, because we'll have to pick up the thread, because two things that I've been doing a lot of research on that have been lighting a fire under me personally. One is that 61% of people will be laid off or
Hmm.
underemployed at some point in their career.
Oh, absolutely.
61%. So like, this is real data,
Oh, yeah.
evidence data, right? Now the why behind it varies. But Philip,
Right.
you talked about divisions getting shed, acquisitions happening, right? Things that are completely out of your control.
Oh, yeah.
But there certainly was a narrative for a point in time that if you got laid off or separated from a company, you were damaged goods.
Right.
And what was wrong with you. That is a complete misrepresentation of what's happening in our economy today.
Oh, absolutely.
But then what you said, Dr. Baker Jones, around there's so much data around first generation college students, first generation white collar employees, right? Where we're coming from blue collar backgrounds, or, my dad used to joke, no collar backgrounds. And then we're going into these white collar spaces thinking, I want the recognition, I want the acknowledgement, I want the title, I want the things that have been taken, or the things that have been forbidden from my
Oh,
ancestors,
sure.
right? From
Yeah.
previous generations. So I want
Denied.
all those things. So
Yeah.
we dive in head first and not even realizing what comes with all of that. So I mean, the layers that you guys can peel back, I mean, are brilliant, and I'm really excited just to be able to be in spaces with you. I joke all the time that my goal is to be the dumbest person in rooms. Like, I want to go into places where I'm going to be stretched, and this moment has absolutely done that for me, and I appreciate both of you all
Thank
for
you.
being here and doing this with me. So when the part 2 comes, you guys should absolutely come back. It's gonna happen. And we'll make sure to bring you guys on the Career Gems for the Journey podcast, so we can have a longer conversation, more specifically about those two things. Talk about our trauma responses, why we join these organizations, and just this idea that at some point we're going to be severed. Most of us
Right.
will be severed or separated from an organization. And what's our strategies? What does that
Right.
look like for us? So
Right.
we had a couple comments here. It looks like Camelin Turner was talking about how the system proliferates on silence, and
Right.
how, thanks for breaking the silence on the system, and those sometimes the things that go unsaid are the things that do us the most harm, not acknowledging the problems in the system. So really great that you were here. Thank you so much for joining us. And it looks like Hassan Brown also, he thought it was interesting, the no collar backgrounds. Wow, right? And that's a quote that my dad shared, all the time, as somebody who didn't have an opportunity to go to college and didn't have an opportunity to work in a white collar environment. So great conversation. Really excited to be here with both of you. Thank you so much. Please do join us for the Triumph Together Challenge. We'll be here next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll have 2 new co-authors that will, that they got a tough act to follow. Y'all came in and showed out today, and I appreciate that. I love it. Y'all really came in and showed out today. Dropped so many gems. The replay will be available tomorrow. You guys will be able to get that link and share it with your network live. And it looks like one of our other co-authors, Dr. Mary, joined us and talked about a trauma response and how that needs to be a discussion that we have to have. So I'm looking forward to having that and bringing you guys back to the discussion. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I look forward to collaborating with you all again soon.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you so much for having us. Pleasure meeting you both.
Thank you.
Take care, ladies and
Take care, guys.
gentlemen.
Bye-bye.